when you handle challenging emotions like anger, frustration, you have to embrace the discomfort of the emotion. You have to learn that it's okay to be uncomfortable and you're bigger than that feeling so that you can get to the other side of it.
Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, where each week we talk about ideas for raising kids who become thriving adults. I'm your host, Audrey Monkey. I'm a summer camp director, writer, and speaker, and I've had the privilege of working with thousands of children, teenagers, young adult counselors, and parents over the past 3 decades. My husband Steve and I are raising 5 kids who currently range in age from 15 to 25. So my interest in raising kind, optimistic, self-reliant kids who become thriving adults is personal as well as professional. Hi, Sunshine Parenting listeners. I have some really exciting news to share. My book, Happy Campers, 9 Summer Camp Secrets for Raising Kids Who Become Thriving Adults, comes out on May 7th and is available for pre-order now. One of my favorite endorsements from early readers of the book came from one of my parenting education heroes, Dr. Michael Thompson. He says, Happy Campers is a joyful and wise parenting book. Drawing on her lifetime of experience as a camper, camp counselor, and camp director, Audrey Monkey shows us what is most important in the lives of children. She then takes the next step and teaches parents how they can recreate the magic of camp in their own homes. I have never read a more optimistic and well-grounded guide to parenting. For pre-order information about my book, visit happycampersbook.com. You'll find links to all your favorite book retailers there where you can pre-order your copy. Once you've pre-ordered, complete the pre-order form, and I'd be excited to send you some fun freebies, including the first chapter of the book in PDF form. It's called Camp Secret Number 1, Connection Comes First. I'll also send you an invitation to join my private Facebook group where I'll be discussing happy campers and sharing all kinds of resources, videos, and chats. Thank you so much for pre-ordering your copy of Happy Campers. Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, where each week we talk about ideas for raising kids who become thriving adults. I'm your host, Audrey Monkey. I'm a summer camp director, writer, and speaker, and I've had the privilege of working with thousands of children, teenagers, young adult counselors, and parents over the past 3 decades. My husband Steve and I are raising 5 kids who currently range in age from 15 to 25. So my interest in raising kind, optimistic, self-reliant kids who become thriving adults is personal as well as professional. I'm so happy to welcome Maureen Healy on the Sunshine Parenting Podcast today. Welcome, Maureen.
Thanks for having me.
So you are the author of an excellent book that came out last October. It's called The Emotionally Healthy Child: Helping Children Calm, Center, and Make Smart Choices. And I am so excited that I got a chance to read your book and now talk to you about it. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to write this book.
That's a good question. My background, many moons ago, I started as a coach to CEOs and I worked in business. And then I found sometimes they would act like children. So I went back to school and studied child development, child psychology, and I love it. I fell in love with working with children and parents and teachers. So my expertise is really children's emotional health or social and emotional learning. So that's the piece of the puzzle I work with.
Oh, and that's all my favorite stuff. This is what I always, so we were just talking before we just met today as we're talking about this, and I am so much of what you write about in your book and share on your website, which is Growing Happy Kids, very much resonate with me and the work that I do with kids at summer camp. So I'm really excited to be connected with you and just share some of your ideas with my listeners.
Yeah, thanks so much. And the other piece of the puzzle I might just pop in is I have a background in sort of Eastern Western psychologies. I've lived in India, and the second edition of my book, The Emotionally Healthy Child, the Dalai Lama wrote the preface. So I have a background in both traditional, like Western psychology, but also Eastern psychology, because it was so interesting to me that they were very clear in the East of like, do X, Y, Z and you'll feel healthier and happier, or do Y and you'll feel miserable. So to me, that was really helpful.
Yeah, you know what? Sometimes the simple concepts are the best ones. And that's what really struck me when I'm reading your book. I feel like parents can be so overwhelmed thinking that there's so many things they need to do, but there are just some simple strategies, and you outline some of them in your book that can really help just raise healthy, kids who are happy and just can deal with life's ups and downs. So let's start by, I really love your definition of an emotionally healthy child. Why don't you just describe, what that looks like?
Sure. When I think of emotional health, like everyone, it's a complex subject. It's something that we do throughout our life. It's not like a box that we check and we have it. It's we continue to learn and deepen our experience of it. But the way I think the starting point of emotional health is learning how to name your emotions and express them constructively, no matter what they are. I was going to say the idea is that there are no bad emotions. It's just what you do with them.
So just like breaking in there, so obviously you're a counselor. Are you an MF? Like what kind of counselor are you? Like a coach or
an American one, but I have a bachelor's, an MBA, and I did all my PhD work without the dissertation. I just
okay.
Books. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just wondering, like in terms of what the kids that you work with, what are the emotions that they most need help naming?
Well, it depends on the age. I work with kids 4 and up, but I mean, in the book, I talk about, kids that run hot with anger or kids that run cold with sadness. I mean, of course, there's lots of emotions in between, but I tend to see children who have challenges either with deep sadness or get like really triggered, frustrated, angry easily. And, being a child isn't easy. You go to school, you wouldn't organize it per se the way it's organized. People are telling you, time to go to school, rushing. And, you're like, wait a second, so there is challenges being a child, even though we don't necessarily as adults always see them. So there is, getting frustrated is normal and healthy.
Right. Well, I mean, as you talk, every time I think about kids, I always just think about adults as well. That's the same thing with adults. They either run, when emotionally healthy adults need the same things that the kids that you work with need. And it's interesting, if we can help our kids become emotionally healthy children, we're making the world better, because that means we'll have emotionally healthy adults, in the future.
Absolutely. And it's funny because the biggest feedback I've gotten, well, not the biggest, but one of the feedback I get about the book, The Emotionally Healthy Child, is like, it could be called The Emotionally Healthy Person. And parents say, forget children, this is for me. And I think that is sort of the subtext. Like, we always need to learn how to express our emotions constructively. And of course, we're not perfect. We make boo-boos, but how do you repair that parent-child relationship? That's the process.
Right. Oh my gosh. Okay. And then so keep going. Sorry, I interrupted you. So what else defines an emotionally healthy child besides being able to name and express emotions?
Well, that's the beginning point. And then, of course, you learn how to display self-control. You learn how to respond versus react. So instead of just having those knee-jerk reactions, you're actually, taking a beat as a child, opposed to pushing the kid on the playground and you're walking away, or you're doing something differently. You're responding consciously, more carefully. And then you're making smarter choices when you're challenged. So a smart choice is good for you and good for others. For example, I worked with a child who threw his notebook across the classroom. So it was good for him to get anger relief, but the kid who got hit in the head with the notebook, not so good. So you want them to make choices that are good for them and good for others. So that's the goal.
Right. Oh, that all sounds so good, but harder to make happen than just to list the definition. So you have this conceptualization of emotional health. Why don't you talk about the elements that you think are really important and what kids need to learn to be emotionally healthy?
Well, to be emotionally healthy, we have to know what emotions are and how they work. So I have a chapter in the book, The Emotionally Healthy Child, about how emotions work. It may sound like, of course we know how emotions work, but kids don't necessarily know. And actually, a lot of adults don't either. For example, when a child is really angry, I will often say, like, how big was your anger? And they'll say, oh, it's this big. And then I said, was it bigger than you, or were you bigger than the anger? They're like, it was bigger than me. So that's incorrect. You're always bigger than your emotion. So helping them understand emotions and how they work in their relationship to them is really important. And that's under the idea of mindset. So how emotions work. And then you need to know what to do with them. So you need to start creating strategies and practices that help a child learn how to constructively express them, whether the emotion is feeling left out or jealousy or anger. I mean, research shows that as early as 2, and probably earlier, but research shows that early as 2, children have complex emotions like shame and jealousy and embarrassment. So it's really important that we help them early on recognize that all emotions are good. It's just what we do with them. So emotions are simply just signals of what's happening inside of us. So they're just saying, hey, we're off course here, or that doesn't feel right, or, you have to sort of learn how to slow down and pay attention. And it's a process, like you said. I mean, when we talk about it, the ideas are great, but it's the practice. And that's why I have a chapter with strategies, because it's really, how do you make it work in your life? That's the important point.
Mm-hmm. So in your work, you're trying to both help the kids get this new mindset to understand their emotions and where they come from and that they're okay, and then develop the habits to actually figure out how to kind of constructively deal with them where you don't, end up hurting other people.
Yeah, it's adults and children, but focused on children is how they get the ideas of what emotions are and what to do with them. Because we all have them, but sometimes we make mistakes, and that's okay too. We all have our triggers, whether it's, living in California with traffic or whether it's something else. We all have our triggers. It's how do we express them constructively, and how do we help our children? I even say to kids, like, hey, if I know a child needs to calm, and perhaps we could do a breathing exercise, for an example. I'll oftentimes, I have a breathing exercise in here, the 5 for 5, about, using your hand and counting to 5 deep breaths and repeating it 3 times. And, you start with your hand closed, and then with each deep breath, your finger pops out, so your hand opens. But helping a child, I might say to the child, can you teach me this? So that it makes it feel like, hey, I need to know, which is true. I do need to know. So having a real partnership approach, I think, is the best.
Yeah, sure. Wow. Yeah, I just clenched my hand as you were talking. I was thinking that's a really good way to do it. I've done the box breathing where, you count in and you hold it and you breathe out. I love that concept. Do you have anything on your website about that, like a video or a downloadable thing or a blog post?
I don't, but that's a great idea. That is one of the tools in the book, the 5 for 5. What I find it's so important, and why, we immediately kind of go, oh yeah, that will work, is because kids need a physical anchor. They need, even older kids that can conceptualize, the box and different things. It's just easier to have a physical anchor.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that people, adults and children, are having a little more trouble accessing emotions because of just being so busy and distracted a lot of the time? Do you think that's impacting that we're kind of less in touch with our feelings?
I don't think anyone's have any problem connecting with their emotions. I think there's a challenge in how we express them. I think sometimes it's constructively versus constructively. And I think that, say video game addiction, for example, or a child who's just excessively playing video games, they might be a future video game leader, which is great. Or they might be, suppressing their emotions, which isn't healthy. So you want them to learn how to, if they're having a bad day and you say, hun, did how was today? And they said, oh, it was great. And they were fibbing. It was not a good day. You know what I mean? You want them to be able to say even hey, today wasn't a great day, but I don't want to talk about it. You know what I mean? You want them to be able to express their emotions, even if they're like, hey, I need a little time alone or whatever it is. And I think, if you haven't seen the documentary Screenagers, it's worthwhile because it talks about a child's brain and the brain of a drug addict, and they do MRIs and they're similar. So there's obviously a physiological response that we get when we check your Instagram or you play a video game. Your body is like more. So the child with the addictive personality, video games aren't the most ideal thing for them. So it depends on the child. Some kids can just walk away.
Right. Yes, that is so true. And it's such a challenge for parents because I do think it becomes, for some kids, kind of their escape, or it's almost like, adults might need to drink a glass of wine and kids might turn to their screens as their sort of way of coping instead of sort of addressing whatever is really going on with them.
I was just going to say, and I'm not anti-screen, but right. I think, like you said, it's moderation, and you want to do it in a healthy way. You want to make the choice that, hey, let's watch that show, which is really great.
Right.
Versus, let me get lost in this and never talk about that feeling when I was bullied. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Maureen, I really want to talk about, there's one section in your book that really, I have it highlighted. I have lots of sticky notes in it. And the section was The Secret to Success, discomfort. And I think this is something that I think parents have been hearing a lot more about why it's important that our kids experience discomfort and learn to, deal with it, bounce back from it, develop the resilience they need to recover from things. So why don't you talk a little bit about why it's important that our kids need to experience discomfort and learn to handle it?
Well, the world is not comfortable. That's just the story. So when I have to go to the DMV, it doesn't always feel good, but I know as an adult, I got to do this. I got to drive. I got to renew my license, whatever it is. But as a child, you're constantly facing new experiences, whether you're trying out for a sports team or something else. So a new experience is just normal to be a little bit nervous or uncomfortable. But when you handle challenging emotions like anger, frustration, you have to embrace the discomfort of the emotion. You have to learn that it's okay to be uncomfortable and you're bigger than that feeling so that you can get to the other side of it. So that's part of learning how to become emotionally healthier, is learning how to sort of face your feelings, whatever they may be. And sometimes feelings are really uncomfortable. The pet dies, or your friend moves away, or you got so angry, you hit your sibling, whatever it is. There's uncomfortable emotions. And I'll give you an example. So I had a child I worked with who was a perfectionist. It's part of her personality. She felt like when things are perfect, all is well. So that's kind of a tricky one because, as we know, life isn't perfect. So I knew that if we played the game Clue, she was going to likely lose. So I knew that would be uncomfortable, but I also knew playing that game with her was a safe setting. I can help her through those feelings. She could come out to the other side. So she lost, as I imagined, and she was really angry. And during the process, I could see her trying to cheat because she wanted to win so badly. I said, nope, that's a cheating move. And we got to the end and she lost, but I helped her recover and recognize that, it's the only way we learn is by, falling down and getting back up again. And that, our goal is to be the best that we can and then let go of the rest. Our goal isn't to be perfect. If our goal is to be perfect, we're sort of creating unhappiness or misery. So she had to get through that discomfort in a safe setting. So that was a really good thing for her. She is learning how to move through discomfort. Even when I was younger and I grew up near New York, my parents took me to the Thanksgiving Day parade with millions of people. And that was scary and overwhelming to me as a young child on the train and the subway. But when I could get through that feeling, I was amazed by the balloons and the joy of it. But I had to learn how to navigate in a safe way. How do I make it through that? Do you know what I mean? So those are the kind of experiences that help children realize they're bigger than their emotions. They can handle it. They got this.
Yeah. I'm sure you have to, work with the parents as well and talk to them, but how do you counsel parents to help them allow their child to feel discomfort?
Well, I think giving those examples like the ones I just gave, because you want them to be uncomfortable in a safe setting where you can help them navigate through it. Right. I mean, I think back to, it's going to age me, but when I first went to Ireland and I asked my cousins, can I use the bathroom? They said, yeah, it's outside. I'm like, what? There's an outhouse?
Yeah.
But I had to go and my parents were like, it's going to be fine. You have to learn how in a safe setting to navigate what feels like this big, scary world and to move through the discomfort in a safe way.
Right.
I think that's the key point.
Yeah. It's funny, as you were saying that, I was thinking about camp, because I run a camp and there's so much of camp. The reason the kids kind of grow and do get more resilient and confident is because they are in a safe setting, but often doing things that are really uncomfortable. And just like when you go backpacking and you have to dig a hole and poop in the woods,
Right? Totally.
That is way outside the comfort zone for kids, but they are so proud of themselves. It's pretty darn funny. We have a thing called a 5-star poo if you can do that when you're out backpacking, because it's like, oh my gosh, that is so uncomfortable. And there's, leaves and prickly stuff and everything else. So anyway, I really appreciate that work that you do and that you're helping both the parents and the kids understand that discomfort is okay. I think part of it is just people need to be reassured that even though this doesn't feel great right now, that's just part of life. Like that's being just uncomfortable sometimes. So I really, really like that. So you live in an area, Santa Barbara, Montecito, where there's been a series of just horrible tragedies. You had the fire and then the flooding and just really tragic for many families who lost homes, lost family members, friends. So that was a time where you were, I'm sure, counseling a lot of people who had gone through not just, I would say, extreme discomfort, a real tragedy. What makes kids or adults or anybody more resilient through experiences like that? What are some things that you've witnessed or that you've helped people with that have helped them overcome just that really, really kind of awful tragedy that we hope most people never have to experience?
Sure. That's a very good question. My first book, Growing Happy Kids, was about inner confidence and resilience. So if you want to dive deep into it, you can go there.
Okay.
I would say from my experience, having lived in New York City during 9/11 and also with these Montecito mudslides, I would say the importance of community cannot be understated. So having someone else, whether it's a peer, a teacher, a neighbor, a friend, reach out and really help someone along is vital. And I would say that, getting the support you need, that not only community, but the support from friends in your church or your synagogue or whatever it may be, but getting that support that, we're in it together. Because when you have disasters like that, it does show the human spirit quite often. There are always helpers. So we look for the helpers, and that there's always that idea that, we are in this together. We're not separate. What I do to me, I do to you, and what you do to you, so helping each other and that we're stronger together. So that's my own witness, the kids and the parents and the families that I know that had to, I have friends that aren't in their house yet because it's still being redone. So it's a process. As long as they have people around them to support them emotionally, you can emerge through it with stronger and more resilient. The children I know that lost friends and things, it was a learning experience, and we can't fix everything as parents and teachers and professionals. We want to fix everything. Sometimes we want to put kids in a bubble, but there's not much to say when a child loses a friend. You know what I mean? It's unfortunately a very early lesson in loss, but it also helps us normalize loss. Like everything is born and it dies, not to depress the child, but to show them there are these cycles of life. In the spring we plant flowers and in the winter they go away. There's cycles of life, and we may not have the answers, but we're here for you. You know what I mean? And we give them outlets to express their emotions. If you're angry and sad, that's fine. I don't need you to fix that today. We just need you to let it out in a constructive way again versus acting out or doing something not in your best interest.
Right. Which I know with kids often happen. I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson's books. And they just talk about thinking about like they're doing bad behaviors. Be curious about it because, it could be that they're, traumatized and upset about something that happened and it's coming out being mean to other kids.
Yeah, I always think of quote unquote bad behavior as a child who just hasn't yet developed the skills to handle the emotions they're having. So they just don't know what they don't know. So sometimes they don't even realize that, it's even like adults. Sometimes we don't realize like I'm off today. Like I don't know why I'm off. You know what I mean? And then you dig deeper and you're like, oh, that did bother me. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's learning to somehow pay attention and to help children. And I really do believe the lens that like if a child is behaving badly, they just don't have the skills yet. So opposed to sometimes it's easy to say, they're just being mean or they're just manipulative. You know what I mean? But like to step back and say somehow they don't have the maturity or the skills yet. So how can I help them?
Right. And I think it's really important for, when you're thinking about kids or whether you're working with kids or your friends are talking about their kids is to not just label kids and say they're a mean kid, or something like that. Because I think sometimes parents and adults sometimes, put a kid in a box like that, where that's a kid, like you said, they have some skills that are lacking that they need to learn and we need to help them learn that, or that's what they need is not for people to get them in trouble all the time. They need help figuring out how to handle those emotions that they're having.
Right. And life is dynamic, right? A child that's a bully one day could be a very compassionate child the next year.
Absolutely.
And it's the same thing with adults. Someone who's XYZ one way can be different the next year. So it's a practice, right?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, Maureen, our time is running down. So I wanted to share a few other things that people can find in your book and then also have you tell us about your website and where they can find everything. So some of the things that I enjoyed in the book that we didn't have time to talk about but are really, really, I thought, very helpful is you have this great chart. It's on pages 47 and 48. And I'll put this in the show notes for people who pick up a copy of your book so they can check it out. But you have this great chart that explains what the kind of the symptoms are of someone being off balance, in healthy balance, or optimum balance. And like an example is, off balance is reactive, healthy balance is learning to respond, and optimum balance is responsive. And then you have all these different examples of things. And I just thought that was really great. Another thing that I really enjoyed was your 7 ideas that children need to learn. That was on page 52. And again, I'll put this in the show notes, but it's a great just summary. And so like, I'm thinking, a parent who's maybe too busy to read the whole book, which by the way, is a quick read. So most people could do it, but there are just 7 ideas that children need to learn about emotions. And I also just really liked your thing about the emotionally healthy mindset on pages 60 and 61. You had these little grayed out boxes that just are really just a summary of what it is to be emotionally healthy. And like you said earlier, it applies to both parents and kids. So I just found your book really helpful and such a great reminder about just some strategies and tools that we can all use to help our kids. That you have a great set of strategies in the back, including the breathing that you talked about and several other things. I love the tools section. It's really, really great. So it's a really great book. Again, it's called The Emotionally Healthy Child, Helping Children Calm, Center, and Make Smart Choices by Maureen Healy. So Maureen, tell us about you have another book, Growing Happy Kids. It was your first book, and your website. Tell us about both of those things and where people can find you.
Sure. You can go to growinghappykids.com. You can sign up for the newsletter and you get a free sample chapter. And my prior books were Growing Happy Kids and The Energetic Keys to Indigo Kids, about sensitive and strong-willed children. And this latest book, The Emotionally Healthy Child, is for every parent. So I'm delighted to connect with you.
Yes, it's been so much fun. And of course, now I'm going to have to go out and get the other 2 books. I don't have those, but I will, because I really do want them in my library. I love your style of writing is very relatable, and it's a positive outlook. I think parents can read it and just feel encouraged and just have a few tools of just things to help raise a more emotionally healthy child. So it's really an excellent book.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on the podcast, Maureen. I'm sure we'll stay connected, and maybe we'll do another episode about one of your other books.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Maureen and got some great tips for raising emotionally healthy kids. As always, you can find notes about what we discussed and links to Maureen's website and her books on my website at sunshine-parenting.com. Search for episode 79. I'll end this episode with some words of Maureen's from her book, The Emotionally Healthy Child. The raising of emotionally healthy children is done from the outside in, through teaching ideas and tools, and also from the inside out, through mindfulness and character building, so that children can move with gusto toward their healthiest and happiest lives.
This podcast is a proud member of Parents on Demand, a network of high-quality shows for families just like yours. Download our free network app on Apple and Android and listen to your favorite episodes on the go.